We are in open session, and anyone who wants to join us electronically or in person is welcome. And we're going to move on and ask Rosemary to do a president's report.
Well, good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Rosemary.
Morning.
I'm glad to see everybody both in here and over there on the wall. In some ways, my president's report is really about movement. I have to say that the vast majority of my time in the last few months has been about trying to put the pieces together, not just physical pieces, but emotional pieces and spiritual pieces to help us make big decisions. I'm very grateful for Allison's morning chapel, because it was chapel, and I'm incredibly grateful for it. It talks a lot about the things that have been preoccupying me. Most specifically, I'm really glad you used that Fisher quote. It's one I've used almost my entire ministry. I love it because I'm a universalist at heart. Restoration's version, regular.
Yeah.
Not ultra. I just want to be clear.
Well, that's a relief.
Thank you. As I was coming around the corner from Easton Hall, I looked at this little building. I'm reminded that this is the fourth home of Starr King, that we were on the Berkeley campus in some ways before that, before they took it. Thank you for that reminder, Lynn. And then before that, we were in the parish hall of the First Unitarian Church of Oakland. But this is the longest home we've ever known in the history of the school. Since the 1940s, we've been here. And I'm very grateful to everyone here for being willing to make the psychic leap about the possibility of leaving home and finding a new home. And whether or not that's the right thing for us to do, and if it is, where should it be, and all the things that have gone into the deliberations that we will probably take up later on today. For people who are who haven't necessarily been part of all the different conversations, it's important for us to remember that just as the rest of the country seems to be in disruption, theological education, where in some way or another I've spent most of my life in Unitarian Universalism, is also an incredible disruption. There is nothing that is happening to those of us who are in leadership in this school that isn't happening to theological school leaders all over the United States and Canada. No. And I think we need to remember that, because it's important for us to place in context some of the difficult decisions that are before us. We are not alone in those decisions. And so we should not act as though we are alone in facing the disruptions that have come from a whole host of factors, not all positive, and not all monetary. We have stewardship on our hearts and minds because we are a fiduciary body here, and so we have to think about the money. But there is so much about theological education, about our country, about what kind of country and world we want to live in, and what kind of people we want to be. That speaks to that disruption. And I would like us not just to move or to look toward the idea of stability, but to this idea of flourishing. Because that's what I work for. I am not leading in this institution so that we can survive. Survival is not enough now. It just isn't. Flourishing is what I'm after and what I hope all of us are after. Larry has done a lot of work in tracking the history of theological schools. And he's always talked about the ways in which Starr King has always been this scrappy little place that sort of stands on the precipice of extinction and then pulls back. And it's a great story as far as it goes, but we can't stay there. That's another story we can't keep telling. We have to tell a story of flourishing because we believe in the mission and in the work that we do. It's never out of my mind that we have a responsibility to Unitarian Universalism, to multi-religious freedom and knowledge, and to liberation. And that is the outer edge, I think, of what our faith tradition is. That's the edge of where our tradition is operating right now. There is another disruption at work in Unitarian Universalism. Natalie, I was gonna say alluded to it, but she didn't allude to it, she jumped right into it. And I was grateful for that there's so many things that are in play in our faith right now. And we can't be distracted, or we can't keep being distracted by the money piece, the drama pieces, the other things that we are often caught up into for sometimes very good reasons. If we believe in the work that we do, then we have a role to play in the transformation of Unitarian Universalism. And we can't do that if we're always worried about whether or not people can get in the building, whether or not we have enough of something, whether or not tech works or it doesn't work, whether or not we have enough people for whatever project we want to do. We need to liberate ourselves from this scarcity that keeps us from fulfilling our potential as a movement leader. We've always been a movement leader, but it's always been this kind of scramble to both lead in the movement and make sure we are okay, that we survive. It's not enough because the disruptions are too great, the dangers are too great. I mean, a lot of people are talking about how the world is on fire. The world is literally on fire. The movement is working hard to set fire to itself right now. And we know enough now to resist the arsonists and to be the people who are about creating something new. I think the experiences of the last 5 to 10 years have taught us how to resist the arsonists, because there are plenty of them. Well, it's taught me, and I'd like to think that it's taught all the rest of you all about resisting the arsonists, because they're out there. And they're definitely taking aim here in Berkeley at us. And the experience, I think, of the first couple of years of my presidency have really been on my mind a lot. if I'm not particularly feeling spiritually grounded, there's a lot of anger right now for what I feel was time that we couldn't spend on the necessary work. We didn't have time to do the thinking that we've been able to do right now. So there was medium and long-term damage to the possibilities that were before us, because people decided they just want to set fire to what they couldn't control. They just figured, let's just burn it down. And we survived that. And I was very touched by a line in the ATS report that we can't distribute because it's not official. But they mentioned that how proud we should be that the beginnings of my presidency and the disruptions that occurred within it did not bring the school down. And it could have. I know that in retrospect. I didn't have time to think about it at the time. There was no room to think about that. But when they wrote that and I read it, I was like, you're right. We could have gone under. But we didn't. And it has so much to do with all of you in here. You were the people who didn't walk away. Even if you weren't on the board at that moment. You were the people who didn't walk away. You were the people who said, I believe in this expression of Unitarian Universalism. I believe in this multi-religious, multi-theological, multicultural, foundational place. I can't even imagine how many conversations you all had in private with people who were asking you what in the world you were doing with these people over there. And I know each of you has had at least one of those conversations, and many of you had several. So I thank you for not walking away, and I thank you for being faithful so that we could be faithful together at this moment to do what our faith asks of us now. And I want to thank particularly Gabriella. Gabriella has been here longer than any other person except Fred. And so there's this deep knowledge that she holds that was so grounding for us when we had so many losses, particularly Ibrahim Baba. And it was so important to me to be able to talk with her, commiserate, be cranky together about things at a time when we were trying to turn the ship. And I know that it was often really painful for Gabriella to be here, especially in the first couple of years, because I was just the new kid in town. But Gabriella had been here for a long time, and basically she got dragged. She got dragged. And she doesn't talk about it, but her faithfulness in the midst of this was really inspirational. So when I felt like I was like, I don't know why I have to do this one more day, I remembered that Gabriella had been doing this for a long time. And so I want to make sure that I thank you publicly for everything you did to help me stay here. And it wasn't like I was ever going to leave, but I'll leave one day. But not soon, because there's work to do. But I wanted to talk about that in all these things in this moment. There's a real recalcitrance in the movement that we could get dragged under by if we allow ourselves. I want to posit that we are actually a resource for the movement. And that's where I would like us to place our time and energy. We know things about this movement from liberal to liberation. We know what it means to have people walk away from us. We know what it means to have people degrade us in public and lie about us in public and make all kinds of claims about what we're doing here. And we know what it's like to try to fight our way back to that. The movement is in the middle of this right now. And we know things that they need to know. But we have to be here for them to be able to draw upon it. So this is not so much a report as it is a meditation, I guess, because most of what I have been doing comes up later in the
right.
in our list here. But I just wanted you all to know how grateful I am that we have put together this group of people at this time and place to do this work. Some of you I didn't know before I came out here. Some of you I've known for many years in different leadership contexts. And I am incredibly grateful that we've managed to find ourselves together here now to do really hard work for a really good reason. Several really good reasons. And I thank you for everything that you've done and everything you're going to do.
Thank you, Ruth. Comments, questions before we get into the next item on the agenda, the open session? Any opportunity here among board members or with our guests? Anyone who's connected electronically?
Can I just say thank you for staying?
Yes.
And please say it again. When you get the GA and when you're in other places. It's important.
Matthew, anything on chat?
Betty Jean said, deep, deep gratitude for Rosemary. And then echoing her gratitude for Gabriella as well. Sky said, yes, I feel really grateful for that meditation from Rosemary.
Thank you.
I'll just add, because I know you won't say this, but in talking with Rebecca Parker about everything that happened during your early tenure and leading in my early tenure, while the kerfuffle was not about you, it was about you and your position as a female leader and as a Black woman that was chosen to lead this institution. And so let's not forget that the forces that we're trying to counter that are oppressive were at play in trying to sabotage your early presidency, and did so to a certain extent. So we are countering oppression by lifting this institution up out of its financial inconsistency.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jessica. Thanks.
And could I just add one thing? Our sister school may be about to experience some version of what happened to me. Elias has been not attacked in the same way, but definitely pressured in some of the ways that I was pressured. And he and I have been creating a relationship as presidents of our remaining schools that share a common commitment to collaboration whenever we can do it. So our movement has not yet gotten over its tendency to want to fool around with what it can't control. So thanks for that reminder.
Can I add to that as we perhaps in our own ways move to support Elias and his presidency and his willingness to work in a collaborative manner with Starr King, I think we also need to understand our organizational structure. As a non-ordained person, Elias is open to different, I don't know how to say, it's different kind of attack. People are not bound to treat him under the Code of Professional Practice of the Unitarian Universalist Association. So I think we should all, if we can, in our ways, remind people that the respect is due no matter your status, ordained or lay. We are all actually called to treat each other with the same respect and honoring our worth and dignity, and that personalized communication should not cross a certain line, no matter what your status is.
They're already trying.
Yeah.
No question. Wow.
Yeah.
That's all I got to say. You give professional code of conduct and say, well, you're not in my group, so
Well,
just be bad. That's
I'm
amazing.
sorry to say that. That's
Sorry
exactly
to
where
say,
it's
that's
going.
where,
No, I believe you. I'm just
Yeah.
saying, wow.
that's where it is right now. There is an effort to change that, but just everybody should be clear. When you see some people's names being put out and other people's not, sometimes that's the reason.
Yeah.
Right? Because as a non-ordained person, you are not under the same code.
And I appreciate, Natalie, thank you for lifting that up. And I just wanted to add to that, both what you just said, that there is an effort to change some of that, right, he may be part of that code of conduct soon.
Yes.
But it's a terrible thing that it happens.
Yeah.
Right, it's a terrible thing that
Yeah.
you had to enter into the ordination process in order to be considered an equal. That's a terrible thing.
I know.
Is there a new
So we have a few more. Sky also wanted to say, and all the love to Gabriella. Sylvester said, I echo that. Your leadership has been decisive. I'm gonna get choked up. Here, so sorry. Diane said, Madam President exemplifies and personifies Maya Angelou's phenomenal work. Yay, President Rosemary. And then she also amen to that, Natalie. So thank you for lifting that up.
Thank you, ma'am.
I'm really grateful that you said that, because I'm in some of the things I've had to do in the last couple of months. I've been with Elias and we talked, and it's outrageous. Actually, it's bizarre and outrageous.
And Betty Jean said, don't forget the Olivia Pope wine comparison for Rosemary. You obviously know this search.
I do.
You gotta tell us.
Yes.
So there used to be a TV show on called Scandal,
Yeah.
and I was a Scandal fanatic, and she was a fixer in Washington, D.C. She ran this firm, and whenever she had tough work to do, she would put on a white hat. And there's a whole theme in the whole show about her wearing a white hat when other people didn't, and what their roles were. So someone actually bought me, a group of people on the search committee actually bought me a white hat when I got the job, which I still have. I do, actually, you're right.
But you're not wearing it today.
No, I'm not.
Lynn,
Well, I just wanted to affirm that we're in this place to support Elias and our colleagues at Meadville, right? That the relationship between the two schools is vastly different
It sure is.
and more collaborative and more strengthening for Unitarian Universalism and for religious leadership in general. And I think that you had a lot to do with that, and I'm just so glad that we have come to a place where we can have the schools collaborate and synergize and have the faculty and presidents of our two schools walking around together and
having a good time, because actually they're really fun.
right, but it matters, right? And I think it lifts all of us up to see our two schools collaborating in that way, and it gives us a lot of opportunities for the future of religious leadership.
I thank you, Lynn, and I want to emphasize that as well. Elias reached out to me and said exactly the same. And Rosemary and Elias have gotten together any number of times, talked about joint operations and strategies several
I'll talk
times.
about some of that when we get to the discussions.
And the movement is so much richer and benefited by that collaboration. May it grow and flourish.
And I'll just say symbolically, there were 3 of us who were participants in his ordination, I mean, his inauguration. Sophia had a very significant role, Rosemary, and I was also a participant. So it's already from day one being put into practice. Yeah.
Thank you, Rosemary. Jack.
May I echo your emotional for me too. Your appreciation for Gabriella. I was thinking yesterday in here with all the energy and the kind of positive feeling, and Ted and I were talking last night about what a transformed place this already feels like. It feels like the movement has been underway for a long time. And I was thinking back to the surreality of what happened and the toxicity. For those of us who were in the crosshairs and the things that were being said about us and about how we operated and what we did and all of that, and this kind of feeling like you were in a free fall and not knowing when the next thing was going to hit. But for all of us that were caught up in that, there was the benefit, I think, of distance. We could be away from it. The swirl was happening, and we knew, what was being said and how all that was unraveling. But we had another life. We had another place to be, and I'm so aware. I'm even more aware now that in the middle of all that, you were right at the center of all the toxicity and negativity. That you held it with such faith is the word. It impressed me then, but it impresses me even more now. And I feel like in so many ways we are the product of your faith. That when it was so hard to find people who still believed in this place, you held firm and were faithful. Yeah, I'm grateful.
Amen.
Thank you, Jay. Other thoughts before we move on? Thank you, Rosemary.
Thank you.
Gabriella. Thanks to everyone. Let's look at the future. This is an open session. I'm going to introduce it, and I'm going to ask Linda and Rosemary to do some introduction. But for most of the time between now and 10 o'clock, when we will take a break and then go into executive session, for most of this coming time, I hope that board members will mostly listen and learn from our colleagues and stakeholders within this organization. What is the future of Starr King looking like? what are the decisions that are before the board now? After a great deal of work and with a good deal of commitment and dedication and support from many people, Starr King has received a credible, viable, motivated offer to buy this building. We need to decide whether we're going to accept that offer. If we do, things will go into motion fairly quickly. We will not leave operations in this building any earlier than June 30th, 2020. We might stay here a little while longer than that. It's open. But if we accept the offer to sell, then we will be leaving the concept. And it would be a sale. The school would get the proceeds from the sale and walk away from the ownership of real estate. We have two strong, active possibilities for the new home for Starr King. Two different ones. I will say that they're both in the East Bay. So the geographic move is within that geography, I'll say local. But they're different. And each one is under negotiation, under consideration, what our partners want and need and what our school wants and needs. It's underway. I'm going to ask Linda to talk about the grounding for a moment, about the building sale, and I'm going to ask Rosemary to talk for a moment about the two main opportunities. But none of us is able to say very much right now. It has to be confidential until it's done. We're in negotiations. And so we can say something, but not too much. What we want to do in this next 35, 38 minutes is listen to faculty and students and stakeholders about what your concerns are, what you need to have preserved or looking forward to in any new environment. What your concerns are about leaving this building and the history and the heritage of this place. So again, what I hope we'll get in this next period of time is comments, suggestions, wants, needs, concerns about what we have generally called the new beginnings for Starr King. Linda, what do you want to add to the building set?
Just a little bit about the context and the charge that was given to us and kind of how we set it up. I led a working group that consisted of myself, Ted Fetter, Allison Miller, Diane Daniels, and Kelly Gibbs, who was our CFO. And the charge that was given to us was to look at this asset, the building, which is a great asset, and to really look at it and say, is there a higher and better use of this asset than being Starr King's home? And the idea is there something we could do with it that would provide us a stream of resources, of revenue, that could further the sustainability and the mission of Starr King? So that was our charge. We did not start with the idea that we would sell it. In fact, that was down on our list. You know, there were a lot of us who really didn't want to sell something that was appreciating in value. And so what we did was had a whole list of things, including staying here. What's the cost of staying here? What about if we leased this someplace to something? What if we did a land lease? What if we developed it ourselves? I mean, that one was really attractive. What if we invested in this thing and we could put students on the top floors and we could put ourselves down here? It was a beautiful vision, and as we found very quickly, totally outside of our reach. And we did talk to developers, and we went through each one of these things and came down to some things. And when we actually hired a realtor and went out to the market, we were not looking just at selling, we were looking at selling or leasing this land. And I think what we came through were a number of people interested. We came through with actually competitors that were bidding against each other to actually come up with some offers that were willing to talk to the city about what was doable and what wasn't doable. So we really came back with some solid things, and frankly came back with an offer that was more than we expected. So that's kind of my story.
Rosemary, about the new opportunities, what do you want to lay down as groundwork?
Well, we had a working group, and I don't have the list of people who were with us, but it included Jay and Yvette Flunder, myself, Elaine Gehrman, and Meg Richardson. And we started with the idea that it would make sense if we were to leave LeConte Avenue, that we would try to find partners in the work of the school. Background for the background, up here on Holy Hill, Starr King, PSR, and ABSW are the only remaining schools that are not embedded in some way with other educational institutions. Within the 2 or 3 months that we were deliberating, the Episcopal school had been basically taken over by Trinity Wall Street in New York. They'll use it as a seminary and leadership center for the West Coast. The Presbyterian school, SFTS, joined with the University of Redlands. And the Lutheran school sold its magnificent property up on the hill to Zaytuna, moved to lease space in downtown Berkeley, and are part of Pacific Lutheran University. That'll happen within, the last 6 to 12 months. So it was clear from the work that other theological schools were doing that the state of theological education is such that there will be very few independent, freestanding institutions. And they'll be highly resourced. There'll be lots of money to do lots of things. But the rest of us who don't have lots of money will be partnering with somebody in some way so that we can maximize the resources that we have. So we began by looking at other schools and institutions with Unitarian or Universalist roots. So we had preliminary conversations with Stanford, because believe it or not, Stanford began as Unitarian roots. So does Reed College in Oregon. It has Unitarian roots. None of those places were appropriate for a variety of reasons. They didn't want to be bothered with us. They weren't a good match for the things that we were doing. So we kept looking, and we found a couple of institutions that would be willing to partner with us in some way and who had the capacity for space for us. We looked at things that we wanted for the institution. We realized that half of our student body comes from the West Coast. So we didn't start looking in places like, west. We didn't start looking west of the Rockies. East of the Rockies, because it just didn't make sense. And the other cluster of our students are in the East Coast, and there are plenty of schools there, and so they don't need another necessarily. We wanted to find an institution that had similar values, or at least values that were compatible in some way. They didn't necessarily need to be doing the exact same work that we were doing, but they needed to be aligned with us in some ways or another. We needed to think about the possibility of providing housing for students. One of the big challenges for our students is that they can't be here physically because they can't afford to be here physically. There's a subset of people who, if they could afford to be in the Bay, would pick up from wherever they are and move out here. And in fact, in my first couple of years, that was still happening. People would come here for intensives. They'd get incredibly excited about being at Starr King. They'd go back home, rearrange their life, pack up their stuff, and come out here. But they can't do that, because even the people who are already out here can barely stay out here. And what we think of as high-res students are really commuter students who drive as far as 2 hours to get here for classes. So we were trying to figure out, isn't there some way that we can find an institution or make a deal with somebody to talk about housing for our students? We believe that one of those institutions has that capability for us. I'm trying to think of what else. And accessibility, physical accessibility to them. An elevator, a ramp, some combination, some way that it makes it easier for people to actually get in and do their work. Parking was a secondary one, but not to those of us who have to drive. We believe that one of the institutions will make it possible for us to give up the game of Tetris that is our parking lot. Thereby saving the bumpers and sides of many cars. And so there were lots of things like that. We thought about the ways in which it's difficult for our students to manage in this space. It's difficult for staff and faculty to manage in this space. And could we find a place that might make those things easier? We believe that one of those institutions is better than another at most of the things that we were looking for. One of the institutions is adequate for some things and not the others. And we would have to make some additional adjustments. The last thing I want to say is that it was very important to us to locate a place that had the capacity to help us take care of the Wilbur Rear Book Collection, because that is a priceless asset for the school. And there are a couple of options around that. We haven't finished looking at that part particularly. Both of the institutions could point us toward some support for that, but didn't completely have an answer. But one of the institutions has a greater capability of either pointing us in the direction of their rear book collection and sharing space with that one, or creating space for us to build out our own, a new improved version of what we have downstairs with better lighting, air, and a little more room to maneuver. So, and all of these things are in negotiation. So we can't be more specific about the entities, but they are in the East Bay, because it was very clear that that was something that was really meaningful to the vast majority of people who were part of our community.
Thank you, Rosa. So let me get into it. We're at 9:35, so I'm inviting you at least till 10:05, and we'll push that a little longer if we need to. But about 10:05, we will take a break and go into executive session. Till then, tell us, please, your concerns about these possible changes, your preferences about what the future looks like for Starr King. I invite comment.
We have Jessica Clay.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Jessica.
Hi, Madam President. Can I just say first, it would be nice for those of us who are alumni and far away from the school to know who the board members are. So some sort of an introduction would have been great at the beginning. But I just want to say that I was a high residence student. I graduated in 2016 and lived in PSR dorms, and I have no idea what's happening with their housing. I know that's gone through a lot of changes, but part of the draw of Starr King for me was the eco model. But the other part of the draw was being part of the GTU. I took the majority of my classes at other seminaries and really loved it, and was at the point where I think I had 99 credits when I graduated because I wanted to keep taking classes. And so those were really formative to my formation and really important to me. So I worry that if Starr King moves away from the Bay Area, that they're going to lose a lot of those students, because while I loved the classes at Starr King, some of the, I felt like it was missing a bit of the academic rigor that I got at other seminaries. And so I would worry that we would lose people from that. That's my
Thank you. Let me assure you that the changes under consideration are still in the East Bay.
Okay.
So the long distance move is not on the table.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, even East Bay is a big place. So, so depending on how long it takes students to get between classes, I think that's just a concern. And I want to say thank you to all of you who are on the board for serving this institution that really matters to me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So this is Betty Jean. I'm a faculty member as well as an alum. And I actually want to acknowledge just taking all this in, having an emotional response that I anticipated I would. And I feel like in thinking about this board meeting and knowing that these decisions are all in process, I've been preparing myself for sort of anticipatory grief around the building site. So I feel like something that I want to communicate and make sure that is heard by all of our leaders and stakeholders is the need, if we have to make a transition from this physical building, to treat it not only as the sensitive real estate transaction that it is, and a physical relocation of classrooms and offices. Oof, really feeling emotional and just noticing that I think of, and I think a lot of us think of, the building and the campus as a holy site for both Unitarian Universalism and beyond the UU movement. And I hope that we can pastorally and spiritually and ritually and as an immense opportunity treat it as such as we are making a potential transition. I feel like I've been, as a faculty member, thinking for a while, like, how might I support that as a learning opportunity for students, which it is. I'm thinking of, there were a lot of challenges in transition when I was a student, including considering a merger with Meadville and a lot of other things. And as a student leader and as a participant in classes, I was invited to do some of the most rich and deep learning about organizational leadership and about transformation and about how this is part of religious work and spiritual work that we're doing. So I urge you to consider this transition, whatever it turns into as such, as a religious and spiritual and pastoral process, and as a learning opportunity for our students. And I'm also just noticing fellow alumni in the room and on Zoom, and thinking about how our broader community, the people that know and love the school, whether a lot of us have known the building as a sanctuary, as a shelter for prophetic witness, as a home away from home, as our only or primary home for years, as so many different things, and just that we can keep that in mind. And I also want to offer my support for whatever that might look like moving forward. And finally, I wanted to echo Jessica's comment about the relationship with the GTU and UC Berkeley, without which I don't think I would have come to Starr King or gotten what I did out of it. And I wouldn't have used the phrase academic rigor in terms of like an amount or a spectrum. I think there was just something very different and complementary that we get from engaging as students and as institutional partners with non-UU schools and with secular schools. So I'll leave it at that. And I thank you all so much for your service and for allowing our comments.
Thank you. Thank you.
Megan Dowdell said, I'm very supportive of leaving the building and making this physical move. I'm concerned about educational technology and support for our high number of low residence students, as well as marketing ourselves as a fully hybrid program? Question mark. Right. Has that EdTech been a part of the search for a new space? Does new space also mean getting out of the educational technology offered by the GTU? And then Tova said, just wanted to add your access to the GTU library.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't know if we should be responding, but the importance of technology is very much, and the compatibility and ease of use of technological communication, very much part of our discussion. Yes. And I hesitate to add, but I will add, whether it's GTU based or not, we know that we need to build those connections. Other thoughts?
I can keep going. I have an email from Leora Cockrell, who is a first-year student. She says, as a resident of Berkeley, I appreciate that I live within walking distance of the current Starr King location. And this is only financially possible because I live in a subsidized Jewish community. While the current location is convenient, I understand that the school is likely moving, and what is personally most important to me in a location is that it is able to attract current Bay Area residents to the MASC program. I believe that the MASC program is incredibly relevant here, and especially in the Bay Area. I believe that the school could attract more high residence students already living in the Bay Area to the MASC program through demonstrating its relevance to countering oppression. This demonstration could be done through providing education, resources, and/or accessible gathering spaces for communities most impacted by social injustices and their allies in the Bay Area. In order to be physically and culturally accessible, it seems important that it be near a BART stop. The local neighborhood wants a social justice ministry school near them. We asked permission of the indigenous people of the territory if we can move there and how we can make reparations, including artwork and decorations of many cultures, researching and honoring the history of the location, wheelchair accessibility, a nature space or garden for reflection, worship space appropriate for many religious backgrounds, and community gathering spaces. Thank you so much for your consideration for what I have to share.
And thank you, Leora. The kind of list of wants and concerns is very, very helpful to us. Thank you.
Joe? As far as, there's talks about housing for students. Can you give us any sort of approximation about how much of the student body could be housed? I guess my concern is, you want to be very vague about East Bay, and we know that Berkeley's expensive, but everywhere is expensive in the Bay Area. So are we just putting a Band-Aid on this housing issue by, if we move to a slightly less expensive area, how long will those rents go up and then it's no longer affordable there, just even 5-10 years from now? So I was just sort of curious if you could give us any sort of indication about the proportion of the students that could be housed in housing.
I don't know the answer to that question. I know that there is capacity for, well, let me back up. Right this minute, I don't know how many students would want to live in a housing situation that's similar to PSR, for example, which is the most likely scenario. So it's dormitory space. Some of our students don't want to live in that space. They want to live in a house. They want to live in a communal space. That's not what they want. I do know that one of the places that we're looking at does have housing similar to PSR, with meal plans and things like that, that students would have to make arrangements about. And that at this moment, it's roughly, and I mean roughly, the cost of what PSR was, when people could live in PSR. That's only gonna meet the needs of certain students, and we're aware of that. But right now, we can't meet the needs of any student, because this is gonna be the last year that PSR allows people who don't go to PSR to go to school, to be housed there. So it's complicated. We cannot solve the housing emergency in California.
And the other option that's on the table does not come with a packaged housing option. Students would be on their own to find housing. Is that fair to say?
It's pretty fair to say.
Betty Jenkins, echoing and amplifying the importance of the MAPS program and partnering with communities and organizations that share our social change commitment.
That is very possible with at least one of the places that we are looking at.
Can I ask around an obvious question? After your decision today, has this been made public, what negotiation like? Just having come from, having done my PhD work at Claremont, long story short, Claremont embedded into Willamette. And this is the last year that there will be classes in Claremont School of Theology, but there will also be done classes at Willamette. And then next academic year, I should say, will be the first year the only classes are being held at Willamette. But let me back up, which goes to all your other institutions and bidding and other institutions for financial reasons and sustainability. But what I really want to say is when I started my PhD work in 2014, it was already on the table of what negotiations were in process, and there were always public meetings and town halls, and even like, is this viable? And it was discussed, yes. And then I was like, okay, we're having faculty visit each other's site. And did we pass that? Yes. And then it was to the next step that the whole time the student body actually was aware of it. And I think that there was less anxiety just because it was more transparent. So that's my concern is how can we further step to this being more transparent, I think, for the, actually, I think for the well-being of all. I think that is clear.
I would say, Shannon, that the sale of this property, the decision about the sale, will be public fairly soon. I'm pretty sure weeks. The negotiation for the new place, you're making a plea for more transparency than we've had to date and maximum transparency through the decision-making process. I honestly don't know what the constraints are that would push against that, but
it's hard to be transparent about negotiations that are in process. And though we may value that openness, negotiation partners may not. And so we have to balance the needs and desires of a community that tends toward talking about things as they occur with institutions that tend not to do that and who are also managing the anxiety in their own institutions. So that's a long way of saying it will be more transparent as we proceed, but probably less transparent than you would like and that many people would like. In part because there are another partner and because things are happening fairly close together.
Diane, public comments.
Diane.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right. So I'm switching hats here for the moment because I am also a board member and I want to honor that Ted asked us board members to let other people besides board members have their voices be heard, but now I'm going to speak to you as a low-res student because I'm not sure there are any other low-res students on the video conference right now. It is extremely important to me as someone who does not yet have the building firmly embedded in my heart and soul like a high-res student would, that technology is extremely important to low-res students, as is communication and a path forward. When I started at Starr King, I came in as a special student. And some of you know that what I experienced my first term might have led a less committed person to give up and go elsewhere. I did not feel like I had the guidance I wanted and or needed, because as a special student, I came in kind of flying blind. Fortunately, I don't mind flying blind, and I was willing to do that because I wanted the education that Starr King could give me. Everyone I fell in love with from the pulpit of my UU church here in Connecticut, the overwhelming majority were Starr King graduates. That is what made the decision for me to come to the school. So having said that, as a low-res student, a distance student, technology is extremely important. I literally had to upgrade my computer in order to attend Zoom conferences for my classes. That's an expense I didn't necessarily plan on, but I'm certainly glad I did it. I think we need to be clear with incoming students, and I think we need to shout that out as a positive for this school. Even though I'm not there in the building, I feel like I'm a part of the Starr King community. The more classes I take, the more instructors I'm exposed to, the more people I talk to. And I think that's a big deal, because I could not, at 50-something years old, with a husband and children and a dog and an old house and another career and community responsibilities, I couldn't pick up and move to Berkeley to come there for my education. It would be impossible. And much in the same way that I could not have earned my bachelor's degree except with an online program, I would not be now pursuing ministerial ordination and a career as a Unitarian Universalist religious leader if I could not do it online. So for all those who are helping support us low-res students, thank you, thank you, thank you. I can't hug you enough times and send you enough kisses and love. And that's something we definitely need to make sure we're taking care of as we look toward the future of the school. It has been said, I believe in more than one meeting, that the student population has shifted. It used to be mostly high-res, and now it's shifting. It's almost equal or slightly leaning toward low-res. And as we continue to plan for the future of the school, don't forget about those of us who are out here on the fringes who could not afford to live in Berkeley, unfortunately. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Daniel. Other comments? Matthew, is there anything?
Oh, it's easier to read it off of this one. No, this one. I think I want to lift up leaving this land as responsibly as we can, doing healing work and gratitude work with our building and land before we leave. I'm also thinking about doing our own work around who we are and holding our past and present and future as we do this, which I will say sounds like this is happening. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you. Other comments, other concerns?
I've got a couple of things as a student.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's always important to preface that. So as a student, there's things that are really important to me. We have really what feels to me like two very sacred spaces in our school that can house chapel and ritual. And so that's really important. And I think that I've been to courses at other GTU schools where it feels like you've walked into my undergraduate. And which is, it's nice for some things, and also for other classes. I want to feel like I'm showing up for a ritual or a church. We are training religious professionals. And so that's one thing I love about Starr King is we're very ritual oriented, and the building feels it too. Other things, another really sacred ritual space is right next door, our kitchen. I would love a place that has some sort of, that's where a lot of our community builds, is in the kitchen. And so to me, it's so important. And also I realize it may not be feasible. The last thing I would love to lift up is this year especially, we have had lots of days that we've had to close because of the massive amounts of heat in the day. This is not changing. This will become the new norm. Some place that allows us to continue forward having classes, even when it is getting obnoxiously hot outside, where we don't have to close down classes in the building for the day because it's just too damn hot. Is really important because I think that shows that we're continuing and that we are moving forward. We're not staying in this liminal space where we often get stuck in. And so I think those are just a few pieces that I left up all of the others, but those were the other pieces that were really important to me. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Lindy. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks for all the work that everybody's been doing. A couple questions I had. As someone who bought a house in the Bay Area in 1985, when we needed to move to Sacramento, we decided to hold on to it and rent while we were gone. So we were gone for 10 years, but it allowed us to come back. So I do have these kind of anxieties about letting go of, actual property in the Bay Area and what that means for the school long term. And I understand the core question of being able to use the asset of the building in ways that could further the mission of the school more effectively than the current building does. I'm kind of wondering in the various options as you look ahead whether any of them might include reinvesting in property in some manner. We had talked a while back about, some kind of housing situation or something along those lines that was actually owned by Starr King, just as a way to keep a toehold in the market itself, or if we would be looking to a future that would basically be dependent on always being tenants and not being owners.
That's an excellent question. I don't know that any of us has an answer, but is there a possibility of some kind of reinvestment? That is real estate reinvestment. Good question. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe not immediately is my first thought, but
But to that point, that's why I think our preference would be to lease this building, not sell it. And for a variety of reasons, having a lot to do with the difficulty of permitting and development and other things in Berkeley that just wasn't feasible for the people who wanted to do it. We had a number of schools look at us who were very interested in leasing the property, and in the end, they couldn't come through and told us that they just can't make it work. Not unless they would pay us a whole lot less money than what we could get otherwise.
and the time frame of going through the Berkeley
Oh yeah,
procedure.
years. We're talking years.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking so much in terms, I understand that concept around leasing.
Yeah.
Just wondering in terms of whether, reinvestment in some other property might be on the table of what to consider in terms of our portfolio. I think we're heading into a kind of a wild and woolly ride in the world, in the United States. So having all of our portfolio essentially, nothing that's connected to actual land ownership does make me nervous. But I will support whatever the wisdom of the group, wherever y'all go.
Well, thank you, but you raised a good question, and it's on the list. I'm not sure what else to say.
Jesse?
Jesse?
Thank you for the interesting discussion.
We're having trouble hearing you, Jesse.
That better?
Yes.
Okay. Along the same lines as Lindy was mentioning, I too am wondering whether it might be possible to hold on to the property there in part to honor all that's gone before. I mean, I'm very aware of the generations of ancestors who have passed through this place and blessed it. And to me, I feel that especially, not exclusively, but especially the rooms upstairs might be able to play a role somehow in the life of the school in future years, even though we might be locating the bulk of our activities somewhere else, especially if it's somewhere nearby, relatively nearby, like East Bay, for ceremonial reasons and other such things. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Jay Leach asks me a question, just whispers in my ear, and maybe board members should introduce ourselves, just at least saying our name, going around the table for those with a Zoom connection, and you can see the broad view of the rectangular table. Lynn, do you want to start and just go around the table?
I hopped out of the frame so that I wouldn't have my back to our guests in the room. But hi, I'm Lynn Cox. I'm the president of the Grad Association as of this past June. I'm a 2003 graduate of this school. So other grads, let's talk.
I'm Natalie Fenimore. I'm vice president of the board.
Gabriela Lettini, professor and dean at Starr King faculty representative.
Jay Leach, also a 2003 grad of the school and secretary of the board.
Ted Fetter, active UU volunteer, board member for 4 years, chair for 2.5 years.
Rosemary Bray McNatt, I'm president of the school.
Linda Laskowski, I'm the chair of the finance committee as well as the chair of the working group around the building, and have been on the board for 1.5 years.
Charles Dumont, a relatively new member of the board and chair of the advancement committee.
Allison Miller, on the board for 2 years, involved in the advancement committee and the working group, the building working group, and minister in Morristown, New Jersey.
Bruce Field, new member of the board, and I'm a member of the finance committee.
Meg McGuire, one of the 2 student representatives and a 3rd-year MDiv student.
And Sylvester?
You're muted.
Oh, he's.
Uh-oh, hold on, we have to unmute him.
I'm Sylvester Johnson. I'm 1st year as a board member.
Thanks, Diane.
And Diane.
Okay, I was able to unmute myself. Hi, everybody. I'm Diane Daniels. I am a 3rd-year MDiv student here at the school and also a student representative to the board of directors, and right now worshiping at the Unitarian Universalist Church in Norwich, Connecticut.
I also have another comment from Tyson. He said, resubmitting, ditto importance of proximity to public transit. Also importance is proximity to natural space, grass, trees, etc. Also, given our intensive model, proximity to a short-term housing options seems important. Thank you.
Thank you. Other thoughts, other observations? Anyone? Do board members want to comment about the list of concerns and hopes that we've heard? Is there a feedback that we are able to give?
I think just that the concerns that have been raised have also been our concerns, that these are all things that the board has been considering, and I know that the working group has been considering very closely. That yes, that we also want those things.
Just one other contextual comment. We mentioned there's 3 working groups. There's the building working group. There's the partnerships working group, and some of the technology. I just wanted to lift that up. Some of the technology and the low-res student questions. There's also a group that's been working on enhancing our program development. So just to surface that it's important to say that, so that you are aware that these 3 groups are working separately and together.
Thank you, Allison. I'm glad you lifted that up. That 3rd group is looking at the opportunities for operational changes, curriculum development. Gabriella is leading that working group. And it's the 3rd element of what we're planning.
I think if people haven't read the ATS self-study that is on the Starr King website, that gives a very good assessment of where we are now and what the work has been the work has been going on, and has a set of recommendation of things that we start implementing or plan to do. So that's a good document, public document that people can see. And also that, the board has recognized and affirmed publicly already in many settings that there is not one thing that is going to assure the thriving of the school. There are all these different things that need to happen at the same time. So this piece about the building is just one. The piece about being in another is just one. I mean, looking at the curriculum, looking at the technology, all these pieces are important and need to complement and work with each other, and we are doing that. We're very well aware. I also want to say one thing, that it's both important to acknowledge all of our hopes and wishes and needs, and also to acknowledge that it will be about making changes and letting go of things. There will be things that we have to let go of and accept that we might lose, or we might get in a completely different way, and that's part of accepting reality, and it's part of life, and we have to honor that and embrace it and ritualize it. But it's something that, I'm speaking as someone that is not living in her country. Haven't seen my sister in 2 years. You give up things to be part of the community. There are things you gain, and there are things that you let go. And how, as a community, we can do that in an intentional, respectful, just way, it's important. But I'm not going to say that we can just write a list of everything we want or everyone wants and we're going to get it. That would be an immature way of thinking about it. It's not a popular thing to say, but I just want to acknowledge.
Thank you.
We posted the link to the ATS self-study.
Right. Yeah. And there's another comment on
Kim Hampton said, if the sale happens, would the amount the building sold for answer some of ATS's issues about the school's finances? I'll let that one hang for a moment.
Do you want me to respond to that, Tim?
Yeah, you can give a quick response. Yeah.
Quick response is, one of the things we have recommended that we not do is use it just for operating expenses. Because if you do that, you use it up, it's a one, you can only sell the building once, you use it up, it's gone. And so that is not the board's intent. The board's intent is to endow most of it and enable it to give forever. Because that's what we need, is for this school to have a source forever. Now, it's a very small piece. It's part of the solution. It's a very small piece of the solution. So it's Gabriella's point exactly. There's a whole lot of things here that have to happen other than a building sale, if in fact we do that.
Thank you, Linda. Exactly right. One last chance for others to insert their comments and concerns. Matt, do we have?
Did Kim have a part two?
So this page said, this is truly challenging work on every level with so many constraints, needs, and desires. Thank you for your time and care at this important historical juncture.
Thank you. Thank you. Moving to the end of the open session, I'd like to ask Rosemary to offer a thought.
First, I want to thank all of you who are online. I appreciate you being there. It's nice to see faces I haven't seen for a while and see names I haven't seen for a while. Hi, Bill. How you doing? Most importantly, Bill. But I also want to say that there's nothing that you brought up that hasn't weighed on our hearts. It's hard to make decisions that have as much of an impact as the decisions that are facing us right now. But the commitment that we all share here is that it's past time for Starr King to be not in survival mode, but in thriving mode. And even though there are a couple of things beyond our control that have taken us to this point, it is a steadfast commitment on the part of the board and leadership that we use these pieces of decisions as opportunities to take us to the place we most want to be. And that is a Starr King School that is nimble and thriving and connected to the social justice and liberation movements that we have always worked in and want to continue to educate for. There is no one piece of this puzzle that will solve all the issues that face the school, but this particular piece will not only solve one piece, but provide opportunities for other pieces. And we're very much looking at this as a way of providing opportunities for us to do the work that we are called to do better than we're doing it now. And that's the decision-making sort of in foundation. That's the foundational piece that all of us are holding. But we are grateful for you because we understand the deep connection that so many people have to this particular space that we're in. It is Starr King's fourth home in its 100+ year history. We've been here longer than any place else. And so no matter what we decide, it will be a challenge for us. But as Gabriella said, there are things that you give up to gain something else. I gave up New York.
Me too.
I gave up New York City to come here because there was something more here that I felt I was called to do. So I know some of you don't think that's a big sacrifice. I just want to say, in all seriousness,
their own.
Yes, I know. Okay.
I hear you.
So, but in all seriousness, the thing that we care about most is Starr King thriving for the next generation of progressive religious leaders and people with a liberatory framework in our faith. So I want to thank you for being part of that.